It's Diana, going through the ritual of making my morning coffee. That's much quieter. We're back again to look at the intersection of food and literature with looking at coffee today. There's coffee in here. And how it intersects with the poem, Perhaps the World Ends Here. Now today I'm going to be talking about coffee, and next week I'll be talking about the analysis. If I can keep myself from putting them together, because I'm having a hard time of thinking of them separately. It's been a while because life has been happening, and what I've noticed is it keeps on happening. And I don't mean to be flippant. I'm certainly not flippant about my parents dying. That's what happened. Ooh, I'm wrestling. That's what happened in my life. And so I'm trying very hard to separate the food and the analysis here, but they are really blending in my head. And I think part of that is because they're blending with my experience, not just my experience in the past, but my very recent experience. So it's hard to separate experience with coffee because there was a lot of coffee flowing in the last, not just me, in my house, I'm the only one who drinks coffee. Michael doesn't drink coffee. And there was a lot of table and sitting at the table and talking about stuff at the table and talking about the table at the table. So I'm going to start with the table because I'm gonna. This poem specifically says, I made a copy, says the world begins at the kitchen table. Kitchen table. Well, currently, where I live, I do not have a kitchen table. I have a small little kitchen, and I do have a dining table, which I'm sitting at right now, but it's not in the kitchen. And in the house that I moved from to here, all I had was a kitchen table. So it could have been called the table. At my parents' house, when I was a kid, same thing. There was one table in the kitchen. Now they have a table that's been moved back into where it was when I was a kid, but had been moved into another room while they were still alive and living at their house. I'm just going through a list of all the tables I grew up around. My paternal grandmother had a dining table near the kitchen. She didn't have a kitchen table, but she had a bar with some stools. And then anyway, looked into the kitchen. And then my maternal grandmother had a kitchen table and then a dining table in another room called the fancy room or the forbidden room or I don't know. Anyway, we weren't supposed to go in there when we were kids. The kitchen, having a kitchen table, I've realized as the cook, makes cooking much more pleasant because there are people sitting there who can talk to you and visit, and the world is going on there while visiting. And if there's not a table, either a person has to be cooking with you. They're rarely just visiting. Really, if Michael came to talk to me while I was cooking in the kitchen, more likely than not, we'd start kind of trying to move around each other because the kitchen's not that big. Okay. So that's a kitchen table. It's not a dining room table. Dining room table at my grandmother's house was used probably once a year, and that was for Thanksgiving. Other than that, it sat there. Now, it was in there. I don't know how often she used it when she was a person who was, my grandfather died before I was born, so I don't know what their life together looked like. I have this impression they entertained a lot. So maybe that table was used more often. But when I was growing up, it was used once a year at Thanksgiving. I mean, even if we gathered at Easter, we had boiled crawfish for Good Friday. You don't eat that at a fancy table. You eat that outside. And we had barbecue on Easter Sunday. Also, don't eat that at the fancy table. But the kitchen table was where people gathered. If there's too many cooks in the kitchen, then some people are sitting at the kitchen table, maybe peeling. So I remember my grandmother peeling pecans or chopping vegetables. Just other stuff can be done there, or somebody could just be sitting there visiting. It's like a whole culture at the table. The other element I want to talk about is coffee, because coffee is really the only food specifically mentioned in this poem. When I am going back, because again, this is what's been going on in my life. So it's a lot of reminiscing, a lot of comparing how things are done now with how things were done then, either in the family or in the world around us. When I was a kid, my parents made coffee in a percolator. As far as I remember, now I was a kid and I did not make the coffee. The percolator was put right on the stove. We had a gas stove put right there. Kind of like you see those things in cowboy campfire movie thingies. Eventually, and the coffee where I grew up was community coffee. And that was it. Don't even be talking about a different kind of coffee. Community coffee, it wasn't broken into flavors or roasts. Community coffee. That's it. The end. Nobody expected anything else. Nobody wanted anything else. People who moved away had community coffee shipped to them. They might still, except you can get it more places now. Eventually, my parents got a drip coffee maker. Now, as a kid, we were served coffee milk, cafe au lait. It was super sweet milk with a little bit of coffee in it. I would drink it, but I never was like, ooh, let me get me some coffee milk. I just wasn't a coffee person, even as a kid. Drip coffee maker, community coffee became available in more different roasts and different flavors. And eventually you could find more coffee at the grocery store, but people were pretty much still community coffee people. There weren't any cafes that were coffee shops for a long time, till I came back. I'm trying to think. I don't want to short anybody, but I'm going to guess when I was in my 40s, that's when they showed up. A cafe was a restaurant that had drip coffee. That's the cafe. Now, I'm not going to go into how I ended up drinking coffee, but I still don't drink drip coffee. Just don't like it. And I'm not talking about coffee as a stimulant or a drug where people are like, oh, I have to have my morning coffee before you talk to me, because that absolutely happens. I have relatives who are like that. And I know other people who are like that, where coffee is a drug to take in the morning. But it's also, or when I was growing up, it was part of the culture. And coffee shop culture is kind of like that, where it's not as much marketed as a drug as it is an experience. And I have to say, that's how I like my coffee. If I think about coffee, I am thinking about there's a section of me growing up in a culture where coffee was prevalent, where there was the aroma. I didn't have to drink it to experience it. And I like the smell. It smelled good. It smelled like warmth. It smelled like gatherings. It smelled like just the experience of family, of closeness, of community. Like community coffee. I mean, why did they? Of gatherings, of ritual. And some of that still is the way coffee is done. I mean, very much in the morning, I have a ritual of fixing my coffee, and it is very pleasing to me. It just makes me feel good. So why, okay, so that's a question, and that's a question for later when I'm thinking about the analysis. Why coffee? Why is coffee, I'm gonna write it down because I'll forget it. Why coffee? Why is it the only food mentioned? I also have a question, which is the coffee shop culture, because I would say there's a culture there of going, hanging out. Some people go and talk. Some people go and work on their own computers. Is that this question, I don't have an answer to this one. Is that trying to recreate what I just described when I was growing up? Community, family, ritual, experience, gatherings, hominess, comfort. Is that what the coffee shop culture is trying to replicate or replace. This is what is coming in my brain. Two things. One, this is very connected to the analysis. And two, that kitchen tables and coffee are they're like together in my state of mind right now. And so it made very much sense for me because of the analysis that's coming and because of my experience to talk about them together and not talk. And I talked more about coffee as an emotional, cultural thing than as a food itself. Like, I didn't go into how do you make coffee or where does coffee come from. And I think that's okay. It's not what was piquing my interest at this time, which is a great point that, to me, experiencing literature is not always the same. I've read this poem many times. It's not always the same, and different things become important at different times in the reader's life, and that's great. And that can't be captured on a multiple choice test. It also makes literature more relevant, which is beautiful. I got a different coffee cup. I got quite the collection. So next week, I will jump full into the analysis, talk about a kitchen table, talk about coffee, talk about the poem as a whole. See y'all then. Like, subscribe, share, do all those things. Go have a cup of coffee.